What does it mean to be lost? In the digital age, nothing stays lost long. As long as there is a memory of a piece of art, the hunt is on to find it, categorize it, and preserve it. The world is civilized. Every frontier is conquered, and every moment is supposedly held in amber. What if there is no memory? And what if, for one reason or another, something is lost not because it's truly gone, but because no one knew they should remember? 6 months ago, I stumbled across a film by happenstance after looking over a filmography of a director I had never heard of. Seeing its cast, I was intrigued and sought out a copy. Little did I know that when I found it, I had stumbled upon a film that had been forgotten. No cult following, no fan base, no information, no history, no memories. Through careful research, what I uncovered was a battle of wills, might, faith, and disaster on screen and off, marked by a star-studded cast and award-winning crew, without any official or available release. This compiled history is the result of combing through biographies and memoirs, inquiring into the private library collections of the University of Michigan and the University of California, Los Angeles. And finally, the acquisition of 2 separate 16mm film prints, one of which that had to be transported from Australia to the United States. In 1971, author Jack Higgins, writing under the pen name James Graham, crafted a south-of-the-border tale where the sins of violent men, the hopes of desolate communities, and the retribution of the divine take center stage. 1 year later, award-winning filmmaker Ralph Nelson took to the desert to tell his version of the same story for the silver screen. With the shifting media landscape and distribution woes threatening to swallow it forever, 1972's The Wrath of God is making its last stand. So fill your hands, lads. It's our job to save him. Let's make sure he doesn't go quietly. Somewhere in Central America, aping the then recent Mexican Revolution, unrest between rebel factions and the sitting government runs hot and heavy. War-torn and bursting at the seams with corruption and violence, the citizens lose regardless of which side is victorious. 3 men, running from their pasts, are unwillingly enlisted in a strike against a mad tyrant on behalf of his anxious superiors. An Irish hitman, a British officer, and a Tommy gun-wielding priest get out of death-free cards will turn into a battle for a village's soul against a man who wages war on those who abandoned him in his time of need. It's Western, men-on-a-mission cinema with 20s flares and 70s sensibilities, and it's a hell of a ride. With Wrath of God being the 13th feature film of director Ralph Nelson in a 10-year span, he was no stranger to high-pressure situations. The Long Island-born auteur was an Air Corps fighter pilot in the Second World War, and entered a theater of a different kind before the Axis fell. Working in television, he directed episodes of popular anthology series like Climax and the televised Broadway showcase Front Row Center. What launched him from TV to cinema was a connection to one of the true titans of the medium.
And now, Mr. Serling.
Next week, we invite you to take a strange journey back in time.
Nelson and Rod Serling worked together on Serling's boxing drama Requiem for a Heavyweight in 1956, a critical and commercial darling that quickly got a big screen adaptation and catapulted Nelson's career. Over the next 15 years, Nelson would rub elbows with Steve McQueen, James Garner, Cary Grant, Charlton Heston, Donald Pleasance, and Sidney Poitier, whose performance in Nelson's Lilies of the Field earned him the only Best Actor Oscar of his career and shattered the color barrier for the award.
I am naturally indebted to countless numbers of people, principally among whom are Ralph Nelson.
He was a craftsman who never got in his own way.
It's claimed that many directors have definite styles, but I try not to have any particular style that is distinctive to all of my films. The content of the film dictates the style. Generally, in planning camera work, try to make it as objective as possible, with one idea in mind, to tell the story. I'm an old-fashioned storyteller.
That is a professional. Here his style is an emulation of westerns of the time, most evoking in my mind the Sam Peckinpah classic, the Wild Bunch, are setting in an unnamed Central American country. In the film, which is identified specifically as Mexico in the novel, is both breathtaking and hostile. The desert sprawls outward and is beautifully photographed by Alex Phillips Jr.
Desolate place, isn't it?
If God had wanted to give the world an enema, he'd have stuck the nozzle in here.
The towns that our characters inhabit were once ornate and built with care, but have decayed and broken down in the chaos of regime change. Like our three leads and our villain, what was once something of principle and purpose has now been warped by the desolate and harsh place. Emmett was once a revolutionary, a man fighting for his home country in Ireland, whose love for country turned him into a brutal assassin. Jennings, a former British officer in the film and a Hungarian, an ex-member of the Austrian Imperial Guard in the novel, now runs guns and booze for profits. And at the center, Father Oliver Van Horn, a man of the cloth turned bank robber and gunman after being excommunicated by a corrupt clergy that aimed to cover its own sins. Each of these men find themselves south of the border in this lawless land, each out for themselves, having forsaken their people, country, and God.
You have been selected as my unholy trinity, the Father, the Son, and the holy, totally corrupt Jennings.
Emmett attempts to leave his situation, but Jennings steals his passport and money, pressing him into running what Emmett thinks is whiskey to a second party that is transporting it to a prohibition-bound USA. Emmett meets with trouble at his first stop.
My Juliet.
Easy, sir. Easy. We'll kill any man who tries to harm you or touch you.
Only to be rescued by an unexpected friendly face.
There are restrictions on travel, even for priests.
I have credentials.
After saving the Mutchala and making themselves enemies of the sitting government by killing their agents, Emmett and Van Horn are put on the run, and soon lead an army on a fantastic chase scene through the desert. This is where the sensibilities of the 20s setting mix nicely with the Western trappings. Having a full-on auto race across this terrain, pursued by men on horseback, is a unique type of chase that isn't really done. The helicopter camera work and stellar editing keep the chase exciting without becoming confusing. After their capture and this really neat match cut, the three are drug off to prison, finding that Jennings too has been captured. Emmett's cargo was more dangerous than he was told.
It may interest you to know, Mr. Keogh, that your truck consignment was not whiskey as you would suppose. Your friend Jennings was selling rifles, pistols, and grenades to the counter-revolutionary forces.
And they are to be put against the wall. But when all is lost...
Forgive the macabre charade, gentlemen. But it made the point that I hold your lives in the hollow of my hand.
And they're given new purpose, whether they want it or not.
What's the game?
The game, as you call it, is very simple. Your mission is to kill one man, Tomas de la Plata.
So, here at the 45-minute mark, we have our setup. In a lot of cases, that may feel like a little late in the day to get the actual plot mobilized, but it honestly doesn't feel too out of place. After that initial setup, the film becomes a series of standoffs, with Van Horn re-stoking religious flame in the community, Senor de la Plata threatening him, and the town slowly coming back to life. Interspersed is the growing love between Emmett and the rescued Chala, and the building of the plan to finally take De La Plata down. The film is not an action slugfest, with there only being a few primary big action beats that don't drag on. The initial firefight in the bar, the car chase, the sudden cave-in at the silver mine, a barroom brawl, the ambush of De La Plata and his men, and the climactic literal castle siege. Most of these scenes aren't longer than a few minutes apiece. So where do we spend our time? Getting to know our characters and the forward motion that drives them. It helps that our leads are good. Emmett, played by Ken Hutchinson, is our window into the film, being the one we follow most, and he's our focal character in the novel. Hutchinson displays an eagerness that makes you believe in his dangerous background. But he's no slouch in the tender scenes either. His budding romance with Chala, ably played by the gorgeous and mostly silent Paula Pritchett, gives the movie a bit of tenderness that is at times a smidge hokey, but gives Emmett a good excuse to speak his mind and his outlook.
I wish you could see Island Chilla. I wish a lot of lovely things. But they're not meant to be. Not for you. Not for me.
A side note, Roger Ebert, when reviewing this picture, remarked, after musing about the good looks of Miss Pritchett, in print, and I quote, "Yum." Do with that what you will. Hutchinson also does a majority of the physical scrapping in the film, and he puts his all into it. A particularly memorable fight at the end of the second act has him in a fist fight with our villain's chief goon over denying Chella's entrance into the town watering hole. It's a fight that carries them through the entire building and results in the craziest damn punch I've ever seen. Good on you, Emmett. But that's not to say the others don't get in on the fun. Victor Buono's Jennings is shockingly quick on his feet, displaying ample strength and vigor that contrasts with his laissez-faire anything-goes attitude, the latter of which results in some of the film's best lines.
It's the resurrection. And I didn't even wait 3 days.
Buono's presence is almost constantly compared to Golden Age heavyweight Sidney Greenstreet, whose sinister and domineering presence was the inspiration for Marvel's Kingpin. Buono, probably most known in the modern day as Batman 66's King Tut, acts as a great source of levity between Emmett's eagerness and Van Horn's strange mix of sardonic cynicism and honest conviction, while never becoming comic relief and fully retaining the edge that makes a man like him dangerous.
You should have been a military man instead of a... whatever you are.
And pretty much the reason I popped this movie on to begin with is the late, great Robert Mitchum. To the modern audience and the aficionados of New Hollywood, the king of cool is Steve McQueen, and far be it from me to take the crown from him. But in your captain's opinion, McQueen's laid-back, handsome, yet ever-sharp and deadly screen persona is a jewel taken from Mitchum's own vestments. In the words of his out-of-the-past co-star, Jane Greer, no one can underplay Bob. Every movement of Mitchum feels relaxed and unplanned, at home wherever he is, and utterly natural. Mitchum said of his acting that it's something you just do.
It's a job. You know, I've said it before, and I repeat it. One of the greatest movie stars that ever lived was Rin Tin Tin. That was a mother dog. So it can't be too much of a trick to it.
And that shows in his performance here. Van Horn is dismissive, foul-mouthed, blasphemous, and in a constant state of trying to get a rise out of people, something he shares with Mitchum, who was a lifelong prankster.
Is there anything else you require?
I could do with a woman. Not too young, mind you. One that knows what it's all about.
But what also shows through as the film goes on is a genuine devotion and sincerity that feels totally at odds with how he carries himself. When they arrive in Mojada, the ransacked church is lovingly and carefully reconstructed by Van Horn and the orphan boy that took shelter there. Though only in disguise, according to the mission, he steps into his role as a priest with such reverence that it seems to put the mission itself in danger.
And God bless you, my son.
I am not your son.
Thank God for that.
Now, why would a priest be such a danger in a little town like Mojada? Because it's being lorded over by Count Dracula.
He is not to give one service. Once. You tell him that for me.
Frank Langella, 7 years shy of playing the Count on screen, is electric as Tomas de la Plata. In what was one of his first real film roles, Langella takes to the medium with an intensity that recalls Gian Maria Volente as El Indio in For a Few Dollars More. Obsessive, haunted, destructive, and looming like a spirit of death over everyone around him. De La Plata's father was murdered by the men of our band's employer, and his sister was repeatedly violated and took her own life out of shame. All while the people he governed stood by, and the local priest got drunk, squirreled away in the church.
The people of Mojada are in desperate need of a priest, Van Horn, a role for which you have shown some talent.
And how come the church doesn't send them one?
They did. Tomas de la Plata hanged him. The one before that was found wandering in the desert, stripped of his clothes, quite out of his mind.
Charming.
De la Plata pays them back for their sins and strips the community of spiritual aid, bringing what feels like an almost physical decay over the land. The people later remarking,
We are heavy with sin, but there's been no one to hear our confessions.
In Mojada, there are marriages that have not been made holy. And there are many children are born that are not in a state of grace.
And the dying have not faced the end of their years in peace.
How long has this been going on?
Since Tomas de la Plata came home nearly 2 years ago.
I joke a little with the Dracula remark, but De La Plata's presence almost feels like a spiritual evil. Like a monster who's forsaken his humanity for the sake of revenge against an unjust world. In his eyes, there lies a darkness that mirrors each of our men. Tragedy and violence changed each of them into scoundrels. What stands before them is the soulless, angry, and despairing termination of that road. What light still lives in Mojada comes in the form of De La Plata's mother, played by Rita Hayworth. It's with Hayworth's mentioning that we have to talk about the behind the scenes of this flick. Digging up information about it is a bit of a tough job. The Wikipedia entry is a bit light on production notes, and each actor's pages only mention it in passing. Hell, Langella's page doesn't even merit the film worthy of mentioning, and it's completely missing from his filmography. As such, I had to go to the source. This led me parsing through Langella's personal memoirs, a Mitchum biography, 2 separate Hayworth biographies, and any newspapers or magazine articles I could find related to the cast, crew, or the film's production. And through all of this, the actual day-to-day makings of this film are laid bare. This thing was a doggone mess. For starters, Langella was brand new to screen acting, so his experience was one of being lightly hazed as the new guy.
I landed in the center of the church, shifted back to the center of the saddle, awkwardly drew my gun, feeling and looking about as comfortable as the New York stage actor I was. Fucking New York actors, I'd hear muttered as I spent most of my time in the saddle at a 45-degree angle, holding a gun about as convincingly as a nun.
Mitchum was entering his 4th decade of acting on screen, and this was his 6th time acting in Mexico. Langella wrote that Mitchum had watched MGM bury his efforts in the previous years going home, giving it little advertising, and in his words, pissed all over a film he thought was a good picture. As an act of revenge, he sabotaged the production for the studio by insisting to go to the bathroom only in his trailer, which was 5 miles away from set, and refusing to wear squibs or blood packs, as well as ad-libbing takes to get a rise out of his co-stars.
My first line, shouted at Mitchum across the echoing hall, rang out.
Priest!
His response was to be, I am here, Tomas de la Plata. Instead, I heard, yeah, motherfucker. A loud chorus of whoops and laughter came from the crew gathered around watching as I dismounted. I played the scene exactly as written, while Mitchum ad-libbed one profanity after another. I never laughed, never ad-libbed. Somehow, I knew that if I allowed myself to find Mr. Mitchum funny, or took on his dismissive attitude to the work, he'd own me.
Producer William S. Gilmore remembers Mitchum in a more glowing light.
The ultimate professional. He did the job, caused no problems.
Remarking that he was one of the few stable presences on the set. Gilmore said that Victor Buono was
a schizo
that accused people on set of opening his mail. He further remarked that drugs and alcohol were rampant amongst the cast and crew, and that only intensified when shooting ground suddenly to a halt. Ken Hutchinson somehow managed to split his arm open in his hotel room on a shard of glass, an injury that would have cost him his life had Mitchum's wife not heard him scream and quickly put a tourniquet on his arm. With 6 weeks of footage of a lead character already shot, recasting was out of the question. So the project went on hiatus for a full month, with the remaining cast and crew on full salary the whole time. Said time was spent drinking, partying, and in general mischief. Langella writes about drunken brawls and routine trips to brothels by a crew made up of, as he puts it,
polarized, crazy loners.
This also leads to a ton of continuity errors later in the film with things like costumes, hair length, etc.
And at the center of the film's difficulties and the primary topic of conversation in any recollections of the production is Rita Hayworth. Known as the love goddess in her day, Hayworth was one of the most glamorous and sought-after starlets of the golden age of Hollywood. She was an incredible actress, more than just a pretty face, but said face and everything else made her one of the top pin-up girls of American GIs in World War II, second only to fellow starlet Betty Grable. She matched wits on screen with Glenn Ford, Cary Grant, and Orson Welles, whom she was briefly married to. She was named by Fred Astaire as his favorite dance partner. She acted in 61 films over the course of her career, and her performances in Gilda and The Lady from Shanghai in particular keeps her legacy alive in the minds of classic film fans. But that was the 40s. The 70s were not nearly as kind to her. Acting only sporadically and short of cash, Mitchum suggested Hayworth to Nelson, as they had shared the screen together in 1957's Fire Down Below. What no one fully grasped at the time was Hayworth was suffering from Alzheimer's. She often had lines fed to her just out of shot, like this scene in the church, where an assistant is lying under the pew whispering her lines to her. Huge placards were placed out of shot for her to read, and even then, according to Nelson, she could have the script in her lap, and as soon as her eyes left the page, the lines were gone. Nelson ended up shooting much of her dialogue in reverse shots, so she could dub them later. The disease struck in other ways, with confined spaces proving to be a problem. Hayworth refused to ride elevators or enter the silver mine that she and Langella control in the film, and serves as the inn for our heroes to approach in disguise. This shot is actually Hayworth's hairstylist Linda Cale in a wig, because they just needed to get the shot and she refused. A driver quit over Hayworth's insistence that they drive no faster than 10 miles per hour, so Mitchum and Langella started the routine of throwing a blanket over her head and riding with her.
These rides become a hilarious routine of Rita, laughing and screaming at the top of her lungs, with Mitch stretched out on the back seat out-shouting her, singing Gilbert and Sullivan patter songs exactly as written, in perfect pitch, while a non-English-speaking driver careens close to the narrow road's edge as wildly as he dares.
Hayworth's own frustration and terror at the loss of her ability was seen by the crew, as Langella put it,
The neurotic insecurity of a fading star.
They assumed she was drunk and didn't take the project seriously. Her difficulty on and off set made clear that whatever Rita had in the decades prior, it had left her. It would be another 8 years before her Alzheimer's was diagnosed, and 7 years after that, she died at the age of 68. Wrath of God is her last film. This tragedy seems to dominate what little discourse exists around the film. And watching it knowing these things does color Hayworth's scenes a certain way. However, what's shocking is that if you didn't know, as I didn't when I first watched this film, you wouldn't notice. Senora de la Plata is a necessary character that manages to be the moral center and feel real next to her monstrous son. Even when acting line by line, bit by bit, there's something compelling about Hayworth's performance.
That man is not God. I've come to kill him.
Then kill me too. If one more priest is killed in my name, I swear I'll die with him.
No small amount of credit goes to both Nelson and editor J. Terry Williams for the presentation despite these roadblocks. As a devout woman, she works as an unlikely ally for our crew against her son, helping where she can and on several occasions stepping in the middle to keep the peace. When the showdown reaches a fever pitch and our heroes are on the ropes, she again steps in on the side of light. Hayworth's biographers seem to conflate the difficulties of shooting with the film itself, painting the role as muddled and scattershot. But the text itself doesn't reflect that. Senora de la Plata is a full character. Though not rich and full of depth, as it's not that kind of movie, we see another reflection of someone whose life was struck by tragedy, but follows a path of light rather than slipping into darkness. Perhaps there should have been a better ending for her career. But no matter what they say, to your captain, what makes it to screen isn't a whimper it's made out to be. Although it does sport a touch of gray. That gray doesn't touch how much fun the film ultimately is. The themes of faith, danger, trauma, and clashing ideologies, as well as how we walk on from tragedy, are all present and accounted for. But this movie can be enjoyed by just about anyone if they're willing to watch a Western. Hell, it's modern and tight enough that someone who's usually shies away from the genre can still sink their teeth into it. The action is big and exciting. There's spectacle and novelty in the elements of the 20s bursting in on the Old West setting. The humor and snappiness of the dialogue keeps our characters distinct and lively, but never slips into a sense of being overwritten or parody. This is every bit the movie that the poster promised. But it's also the work of a mighty fine director who wanted to tell a story first and foremost, and the prose is never lost to the popular. Special mention goes to Lalo Schifrin, who composed the sometimes insane score. But Cap, what about the book? You still talk about books, right? Well, the novel has some changes here and there. Mostly that the movie has a lighter tone, the novel has almost no humor, and some adjustments to characters. Generally, everyone's darker. Emmett's past is more fleshed out, with it being revealed that he inadvertently killed his brother in a political car bombing assassination. The shame and anguish of it driving him away from his home. Jennings, Janos, in the book, is Hungarian, but is largely the same guy. Van Horn's crimes are made more explicit, and his past is made more dark and ruthless. Where his film counterpart is revealed to have left the church after seeing the corruption of the clergy, Book Van Horn left for love and just barely made it out of seminary. His following crimes are more explicit as well. This does make his slow change over the course of the story, slipping into being more and more pious, perhaps a little more impactful. But in my opinion, it makes his character less fun to be with. Della Plata's mother is killed in the book, with his sister and father surviving instead, the sister being the main point of contact to the group and his father being a senile old man. I like most of the changes that Nelson made. He also wrote the screenplay. Excising the specifics of the backgrounds and combining Della Plata's family into a complete composite character are both smart changes that clean up the story and make it easier to focus on who our characters are right now. The beats of the story are largely the same. That is, until the ending. The novel has what I think of as a more traditional ending for a story of the period. The setup for the ambush is the same. Della Plata rides in and is met with sweeping gunfire, killing most of his men. His sister is caught in the crossfire and dies in seconds. Janos is killed, falling from his position in the church bell tower. Della Plata rides away and soon sends our two remaining heroes an ultimatum.
I drop to one knee and he grabs my coat.
He sent me, senor. The evil one himself sent me.
I knew instantly what had happened, saw it all in one terrible moment of truth. Yet things had to have their logical sequence. He has Victoria? He nodded.
And 21 other people, senor. Villagers from this place, some only children.
The ones who would run into the open country in panic.
What does he want?
Van Horn demanded harshly.
You, father.
Nachita said.
He wants just you, no one else. He gives you 2 hours.
Van Horn, taking confessions, having fully embraced his role as a priest, takes one last drink with Emmett.
You once told me I had death in the soul, and you were right. I walked in dark places for too long to change.
I don't agree.
He said.
Man is personally responsible for what he is, Kyo. He's what he wants to be, and change is always possible, and entirely in his own hands. If you never remember anything else I ever said to you, remember that.
He reached for the bottle and my glass.
One for the road,
he said, filling the glass and took the whiskey back in one quick swallow. What do you mean?
Once a priest, always a priest, Kyo. You know that. Whatever kind of Catholic you are, and so do I. I've done everything wrong that's possible. But that doesn't matter. There's no escape. Never has been. If I never did anything else for you, except this, you didn't kill your brother, Kyo. It was life itself and the people and that bloody little war you were having, just like everyone else. Believe that and start living again. Don't waste your time on Della Plata. He's already damned. Now get that gate closed. And God bless you.
He turned and walked away into the rain and mist, and I did as I was told.
And he rides out to meet his doom. He is soon sent back to the village, tied to a crude cross, upright in the saddle, but very dead.
I grabbed for the reins to steady the horse and looked up at him. I suddenly realised that he was still alive. He tried to speak to me and no one else. Tried with everything he had and failed. The eyes rolled upwards, the head turned to one side.
The hostages are released, all but Emmett's love. As he rides out with her right-hand man to save her, he thinks about his circumstances.
At the final end of things, whatever else he had been, Oliver Van Horn had died for people who weren't even prepared to help themselves. One could find excuses in plenty for them, the wretchedness of their lives, the years of suffering which, in the end, had come to seem the natural order of things. But the end result was still that they would not help themselves, would not move a finger to help anyone else. I was filled with a feeling of indescribable bitterness. I was sick of them, and I was sick of this festering land they called a country. The anger in me took control, so that I went over the crown of the pass at a speed that was excessive under the conditions.
Reaching De La Plata at a remote monastery, our last standing hero and his black-clad nemesis have a duel to the death atop the church. A duel that Emmett ultimately wins.
As I swung round, De La Plata flung himself at me blindly, blood on his mouth, hands reaching out to destroy. I simply moved to one side and he blundered over the edge into the plaza.
And Emmett isn't able to make good on that final conversation with Van Horn.
I was tired, and the Enfield, empty in my left hand, was still a weight to carry. A fine dramatic gesture to toss it away once and for all, far out into space over the ravine, but that would not have been the sensible way. Not little Emmett Keogh of the left hand's way. This was a bad place to be, and night falling. I sat down, spilled a handful of cartridges beside me and slowly, and with great difficulty because of my wounded shoulder, started to reload.
He's a man defined by his past. There is no relief. There's no satisfaction. Just a village of cowards and a pile of dead men, topped with a devil who played at being a saint, and the devil who was black as sin till the bitter end. Emmett is the king of the cinder. Death in his soul. This is the cynical 70s in full swing. The era of John Wayne, Alan Ladd, Gene Autry, and Roy Rogers had soured, and the Italian spaghetti westerns, full of decay and grim realities, took hold. This is the ending of Peckinpah's Wild Bunch. To a less grim extent, this is the ending of Seven Samurai and The Magnificent Seven. Surrounded by death and wondering if it was all worth it.
It ain't like it used to be, but it'll do.
The film and Nelson took a different path. The three survived that initial encounter and still received the ultimatum from De La Plata. Van Horn still rides out to meet them. Made resolute after the first hostage to be killed is his adopted altar boy. It's here that the biggest philosophical shift takes place. For Higgins, our three are used as puppets and a blunt instrument to remove a nuisance. The village is filled with cowards and can't help themselves. Janos dies without any real meaning or ceremony. Van Horn goes to his death as a man trying to reclaim something, but the novel is dubious on whether it really meant anything, as Emmett summarizes that the village won't improve. Though Emmett survives, he's largely in the same boat as before. Nelson sets his eyes on something higher. The villagers take up arms after Van Horn rides out. Emmett gears up with Chala's people way earlier to mount a rescue mission, and Jennings, surviving here, makes like he's going to flee for the Mexican border, and then defines that philosophical difference.
All my life I could have played it safe. Think of all the fun I would have missed.
In Nelson's mind, these are men faced with tough circumstances, who through this job that they were forced into have found something real in themselves. They've found their souls. Jennings turns the car around and constructs a battering ram to let the villagers into the keep, turning his laid-back, pleasure-seeking attitude to a sense of meaning and adventure. Emmett makes good on his instinct to protect the innocent, as he and his team of natives scale the wall and attack from the inside. And Van Horn, though willing to become a sacrifice, is given a scapegoat and a second chance by the intervention of Senora de la Plata, who saves his life from her wicked son. In this, Van Horn becomes a man bigger than his own selfishness. Senora takes back control of her home. Jennings does make the sacrifice in one of the coolest moments of the film. And for a moment, we see perhaps the man he once was. As the church bells ring, all remaining heroes stand, having found their purposes again, no longer defined by their circumstances, but by what they do. The words given by Higgins Van Horn are brought to fruition. We see changed men. The film starts in the close of the 70s gray morality and slowly sheds them to come to the conclusion that, yes, there is good and evil. There is something worth fighting for. And greater love has no one this, to lay down his life for his friends. Nelson took a pretty bog-standard revisionist men-on-a-mission tale of the era and brought it back to a message that was and still is needed. You are not your circumstances, and you have a great capacity for good, if you'll only use it. The film leaves you on a high note that serves as an aspirational tale, one still sporting flawed characters. The novel serves as its mirror opposite, a reflection of what men often are instead of what they can be. Which is better is up to the viewer. But personally, I feel the film has a bit more to offer us. So this sounds like a pretty fun picture. How'd it do after that tumultuous shoot? Well, one Hayworth biography hailed the film as a fun work of parody, riddled with cliches and a fun bit of film hokum that critics were too uptight about. Langella dismissed the film as ridiculous junk. Mitchum's biographer highlights his man as the film's only real pleasure, citing that the shots after Hutchinson's injuries made the film confused, dislocated, and filled with continuity gaps. Roger Ebert's review, one of the few contemporary reviews I could find, gave the film 2.5 stars, saying that the film is good fun, but nothing groundbreaking. It was reported that the film was in Los Angeles theaters for all of 2 weeks, before disappearing from theaters entirely, and largely from the public consciousness, until Hayworth's death, and then again sinking into obscurity. At present, there has only been one official release of the film, through the film's current rights holder, Warner Brothers boutique film imprint, Warner Archives, in 2012. That means no VHS, no beta, no Laserdisc, nothing. Just that DVD. The title is no longer available from that service. Wrath of God doesn't stream anywhere either, being unavailable through any official channels. I purchased not one, but 2 16mm copies, trying to find a complete copy of the film, one of which I had to order all the way from Australia. The one from Down Under is an edited print, and the other is complete, but both are faded and cropped to fit that 16mm format. So, what have we been seeing the whole time? When a film becomes impossible to access through official channels, preservation often falls to the audience. So, I'm not going to directly say where you can get this film, but I will heavily imply it and hope you get the message. You ought to see this movie, and its unavailability makes this a warranted action. So there's a difficulty in telling you all about this. There's only one wide way to see this film, and it's not an official one. In telling you this, it may very well alert the owners to its presence online, wiping it from the web and casting the movie forever into darkness. The cast and crew, outside of Frank Langella, are all gone. The movie's almost completely unknown. If it disappears now, it may never resurface again. This film deserves to be remembered. It's a part of an award-winning filmmaker's work in Ralph Nelson, and it's the final film role of a legend like Rita Hayworth. That alone should guarantee its preservation. But it helps that it's also a damn good picture that people ought to see. I wrote emails to every boutique Blu-ray label I could think of that may be interested in this film, and received only a few replies, some expressing interest, but the conversations haven't gone beyond that. If you know of a film distributor in the boutique spaces, radio out to them. Let them know about this film. Tell them you'd love to see it preserved, and you'd buy a copy if it was released. Send them this video. This movie shouldn't go without a fight, and we shouldn't have to be afraid to talk about it because of its fragile position. In the meantime, watch it through the means that we have. Take a Friday. Invite some friends out. You can be a part of getting this movie the fan base it deserves. Get on it, lads. We're counting on you. And while you're at it, check out Nelson's other work, as well as Mitchum's more sinister turn as a killer priest in Night of the Hunter, a superb black and white thriller. No piece of art deserves to be forgotten. It's our job to keep those fires lit. Next time, we take it a bit easy and return to the land of the written word. And to a personal favorite, we catch a ride with the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Show 'em some guts.
Hey, and that's it. Hopefully that was good, man. Yeah, this was fun. A winner is you.